Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to bounce around, take a look at some things that are going on here in the garden. January 13th, I think, as we're filming this. We had some, what I would really call sudden cold. It has not been abnormally cold in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we've had 20 degrees, low 20s, several nights. Nothing abnormal about that here where I am in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our average low temperature in January, somewhere around 32, with, our historic low temperature, being -3. So it's none of this is abnormal, and I'll take 20 all day long. The only issue was that it kind of went there in a weird way. I mean, in November, we literally had some nights in the 60s, which was really, really kind of crazy. I mean, you would think that it was kind of amazing to have 60-degree highs. We had 60-degree lows. So that really kept things alive, kept things going. So there's a little more things went to sleep in a different kind of way than they normally do. But so I'm going to show you a little bit of damage. It's not that big of a deal. We won't know on perennials that went to sleep and just exploded until later when they start hopefully wake up in the spring. We are transplanting a few things, and I did a 5-minute Friday video on root pruning. If you want to go back and take a look at that. A couple clethra here that are just too large, for this driveway entrance, we're going to move. There are going to be a few plants we're going to move. I'll go through. We'll go look at a couple more in the back garden, and hopefully they're going to an area that will be a surprise for the channel in some sort of way. So I can come out here to the drip edge. When I say root prune, I mean literally I'm cutting the roots, but I'm leaving the plant in place. And I'm just kind of preparing that plant to be moved later on. It's a pretty good technique. You can approach this several different ways. You can come out pretty wide and do an initial root pruning and then come in a little closer later. Or you can just kind of cut it where you're going to cut it. For me, these deciduous shrubs, a lot of times I'm going to cut them down. I'm going to cut them when I move them. So as an example, I'll come back over here slowly. This American Beautyberry, I'm actually going to cut this down to about 1 foot tall, which is what I do every late winter. And it gets to about this height, full flower, full fruit. Birds go crazy for it. It's gotten a little too big for this. It's too big for this space. We'd like to have something else here, maybe something evergreen. It's more, right here at the front of the garden. Well, who knows? I don't even know what is going to go here, but we are going to move it. I've gone with a smaller root ball on this. So when I cut this, and you can see, I could put this shovel under here, and you see the plant kind of wiggle like that. I've got enough cut now that's good enough for me. I just cut a circle around it. I went a little narrower on this because I'm going to reduce the size of it. So I'm going to be taking a small plant and a small root ball, the smallest I could, and easily get it out. This clethra, I'm probably not going to do. I might cut some crossing limbs out of here, maybe take the opportunity to do a little bit of just kind of regular pruning maintenance on it, but I'm not going to prune it heavily. And so I'm going to go for a bit bigger of a root ball on it. So that's kind of where I'm looking at that. With leafy evergreens, conifers, if you're not going to reduce the size of them, you need to try to get the biggest root ball out that you can. But this is what we do. We're root pruning them. Hopefully before I move these, let's say the beginning of March, we will have gotten a little bit of warm weather, a little bit of warm soil, and there'll be some internal root growth re-happening. It'll be initiating some new little fibrous roots right in the center of that root ball that we'll be carrying with us, when we transplant them. The clethra out on the driveway does bloom on new wood, so that's another one I could just, I could take it really down as much as I wanted to as well. I just kind of like the form of those and where I'm moving them to. I'd like to go ahead and have some size. I really want to let them get big in the future. This Viburnum nudum, it's another great native. I'm root pruning all natives this morning. Some of them are either outsizing the space that they're in, or in this case, this Viburnum nudum is actually leaning way out into the sunlight because this oak behind it is shading it too much. So it's getting a very limited number of flowers, a very limited number of fruit. I'd like to give this a little more sun, a little more opportunity to take on kind of a small ornamental tree shape in the future, and have some native butterflies be able to take and and bees be able to take advantage of this plant in the future, and birds, if I didn't say birds. So we're gonna get this one moved as well. This soil is so, pretty highly amended now that most of this digging is pretty easy. This side is easy for me to get to. On that other side where it's leaning to is be a little bit more difficult. But I'm just going pretty much straight down with the shovel like that and kind of cutting through. You can already see I hit one right there. You can see the plant moving. Once I cut that one, that was that's the beginning of being able to move it easily. But you can see I'm just trying to get it where I can get the shovel kind of under it and move it. Later I'll go under it and cut the roots that are going out down into the ground underneath it. But see, cut's pretty easy. The soil improvement that we've done back here has really made this quite a bit easier. So I won't show me going all the way around that. I'm gonna jump over here. See, I've come in here pretty close. This is a pretty good sized plant, but these deciduous shrubs, I'm gonna move it before it leaves out. It's gonna be very low stress in comparison to moving something that has leaves on it or moving a conifer, something that's trying to maintain its foliage while I'm chopping roots off of it. So if I come over here to this side, this is a camellia from my old nursery, and we knew when we put it here it was gonna get too big for the back path. But we had this temporary fence back here it was actually snugged up pretty close. The property line's more like back here. So we actually have another 6 feet or so back here. So we were always gonna move this camellia back here. Probably should have done it last season when the fence came out, when the temporary fence came out, but it didn't get around to it. So I'm just gonna cut the roots on it and prepare it to move. Actually still has a few flower buds on it. It bloomed well in the fall and has a few residual flower buds that will still open on it. But on this, I'm gonna come out a little wider. I wanna go right to the drip line of this camellia and cut down on it, okay? Again, you can see this soil is pretty wild, how I'm able to stick this shovel down in the ground. But I'm intentionally going out to the drip line on this one for my initial cut. I do have an akuba that it's growing on top of back here. It's kind of a one-of-a-kind akuba too, that I don't want to do any damage to. But what I know about camellia is it'll have a shallow root system right up on top. So the wider I go, the better, because I know I'm not going to get a whole lot of depth when I move this thing. I moved a big camellia on the channel a few years ago. If you want to go back and look at that 2-part video, one was the root pruning. About 3 months later, I moved the camellia. It moved just fine. Unfortunately, when you shoot a video like that, you don't wait 2 years to put it up to show it off again, but it was just fine after it was moved. But I'm just cutting the little surface roots all the way around it. Hopefully we'll get some interior root growth on it before. Oh, you see it right there. There's an example of that. You'll hit one and it'll just be you see that wiggling now? That's what I'm looking for. I'm just trying to loosen it just a hair. That's all. And cut most of the fibrous surface roots and a few of the anchor roots that are right up near the surface. And there you go. I'll just leave it be, and I can take some leaves and cover up that little trench that I just created. Keep everything kind of winter protected until I move it in a couple months. I've shot the Sunday garden question and answer video over here a couple times in the last month, and this Marvel Mahonia has been showing off the whole time. This thing, despite the fact that, again, I think this is one of the colder stretches we've had over the last 5 or 6 years, and when I say that, it's only 22-degree lows, but we're rarely getting to 40 during the day, rarely above freezing. But this thing just blooms right through that. It's completely unfazed. It opens a new series of flowers, you know, every day. If it was warm enough, if we got a 50+ degree day, maybe towards 60 degrees, this thing would absolutely be covered in pollinators. But just wanted to point that out. This plant is, you know, every time it's in a video, people are amazed. This thing just powers right through the winter, flowering. I don't know what it would take. It'd probably take single digits or low teens to actually damage these flowers. But it'll, you know, I think the ones that completely open, you know, when it's around 20, those individual flowers die on it. But the new ones that are still closed are absolutely protected. But what a great plant for winter color here. This one's zone 6 hardy. You know, maybe in zone 6 you'd be getting some colder nights this time of year, so maybe that would shut the flowering down a little more than it does for us here in zone 8A. But it is zone 6 hardy. The foliage still looks great. It's prickly. It's a prickly beast. A lot of these Mahonias are. We've got soft caress over there that's not prickly, but this one is, you know, it's prickly, but I don't have to do anything to it. So it's not like I'm over here having to bear hug it or, you know, anything like that. We'll prune it after it flowers. In the early spring, I'll prune back some of these, you know, some of these spiker growth on it. Other than that, easy plant. There's a video on the channel it was actually on the Garden Plants with Jim Putnam channel that I just moved over here a few weeks ago if you want to see all the details on that Marvel Mahonia. We're having a little more sustained cold than we've had for the last few years, but I suspect that right around the corner it'll warm up pretty quickly. And one of the things I want to have prepared for that is going ahead and cutting back the old foliage on my hellebores. So, you know, we'll come in here and before any of that new growth starts on them, I can go ahead and cut this old foliage back to the ground. All this can go on compost pile or whatever you want to do, but we'll go through and clean up pretty much every hellebore. I can also at the same time, if I want to, clean up these crown, you know, pull the leaves off the top of them. I don't. I just, you know, they'll come right up through it without any problem. I know it's a little messy for some folks, but you know, it's offering some protection to plants back here. It's free mulch. But there you go. There's a cleaned up hellebore. The reason we'll do that is because this old foliage just gets in the way of all that new fresh foliage and flowers. They'll flower first, and then new foliage will come. It's a much fresher looking plant, but we have hellebores kind of throughout the garden. Some of them, you know, have become quite a bit better foliage plants than they used to be. So this is an example of one that might be a little harder to want to cut it back because you know, the foliage is so nice on some of these newer ones. But again, I just want this out of the way so that when these flowers come up in here, they really show off, and then we'll get fresh foliage to replace this for the growing season. This one's already coming out. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm trying to beat right here. It's already in the process of putting on new leaves right down here in the center. You see that? I'm gonna cover this back up with a little bit of leaves. I'll kick some of these leaves back over it that were on it. That'll help protect that foliage if we do get any kind of cold that could actually hurt that newer foliage. But there you go. Did I get it all? I did not. Okay. So there you go. We'll find a weed in here at the same time. We'll pull that out, clean all that up, and then you see all that is coming. I'll just kind of do this. It'll come back up through that easily. We'll see that in maybe 3-4 weeks. We'll start to see that vigorously start growing and flowering, and then we'll get really new, fresh, nice foliage for next season. It's January here, and we're still leaving up our native perennials standing big and tall in the garden. Joe Pye weed and coneflowers and black-eyed Susans and many other native perennials that things may be overwintering in. Our non-native perennials, like this anemone, I'm going to go ahead and just cut to the ground and just get, in general, start cleaning up, because, you know, we're not, even though it's still super cold out here this morning, we're not far from things, as you can see from that hellebore back there. You know, as soon as we get some warm soil temperatures, we've got a bunch of dahlias. We're on the edge of where dahlias can be left in the ground. We do leave them in the ground, but some of these are back here on this line are well dormant under the ground at this point. I'm going to go ahead and cut this material off, just in general, trying to make this place look, even though it's dormant, it's wintertime, it's not supposed to look, you know, it's supposed to look like winter out here. Not trying to hide that it is wintertime. And the garden's going to have a certain look in the winter, especially when you're kind of having a real winter. What I do have back here, though, is a vine that I'd like to try to dig out. As you can see right here, I'm gonna grab a shovel. Under one of the osmanthus along the line, along our screen here, we've had this smilax. It's been growing up through this thing repeatedly. We cut it down, it grows back repeatedly. And I'd like to get this tuber out of the ground. These tubers can be gigantic. The funny thing is, back, Steph and I worked together at a garden center she's gonna get closer here so you can see this thorny vine that's coming up out of the ground. It actually has beautiful foliage up near the top. It's absolutely wicked down at the bottom and near impossible to get rid of once you have it. But back when we worked together, I don't remember how old we both were at that time, late teens, early 20s. The original owner of Rake and Hoe Garden Center, Albert Gerganis, Steve Gerganis, his son, had taken over the garden center, and that's who I worked for. But Albert would come to the garden center and hang out, and he had this little area beside the parking lot where he had these smilax in big pots where he was growing these giant tubers. And there were a lot of folks that coveted these giant smilax tubers because they would grow them up and over their doors up in mostly North Raleigh, and they were beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful evergreen vine if it's kind of cultivated to look that way. If it grows up through the shade and grows up through your magnolia over here in the woods, it's just a weedy, thorny mess. But again, cultivated and thought about and pruned and that kind of thing, they're quite beautiful over doors. That trend has kind of gone away, but people would pay, this was 1986, 87, 88 to 90 when I was working at this garden center, and people pay $175, $200 for one of these tubers to get, because the tuber size mattered. If you had a small one, it would take 10 years to cover up the door, but if you had one in a big 25-gallon container, it could go pretty grow up pretty fast. So I've talked enough about it, but I was going to go down here and see if I could finally, possibly eliminate it. It's been growing next to this, what was that stuff that was there, you think?
It was
Morris alba.
Dogwood.
Oh, it was a dogwood there, okay. That had died. Anyway, this tuber, oh, this one's not going to be too bad. I bet this isn't the one that's been giving us the most trouble. Now, after all that talk, this is a tiny little tuber. I think maybe we've controlled it enough over time that it's just smaller now, maybe, or I'm leaving part of it to what's actually happening. It's much bigger than what I just dug out. But here's part of the tuber right there. You can see how this thing can just become massive under the ground. So cutting this thing to the ground will hardly slow it down. It'll just come right back from that. What I'll do here is just chop that away from that tuber and get this tuber out of here. And let's see if we can, oh yeah, it's much bigger. And that stump is coming out too. It's wrapped up in that stump is what it was. You see this? Oh. Yeah. But that's just one little piece of one. This is nothing compared to what they get, but that's how that thing can just absolutely take over an area. You can see how it's storing. It's basically preparing itself for you to come along and try to cut it back by storing all those nutrients underground and preparing itself to be able to come back repeatedly in the future and probably be fireproof. A lot of plants in the Southeast and, United States, in general, a lot of things are born in fire. You know, a lot of plants are. And so imagine these things growing up, big pine trees, and then, you know, fire comes through, burns it back to the ground. Well, it ain't going anywhere, is it? It's coming right back from that. One last thought on this spot. This is the type of thing where that stump has finally come loose down here at the bottom of this chain link fence. And, you know, there's nothing else that's going to be planted back here. There's a dahlia that I'm kind of standing around. It will come up, you know, where this is. But this old stump right here breaking down is food for microbes. It's food for small beetles. It's food for lots of things, and it's not in the way of anything. So I just kind of knock it over, hide it just a bit. I'm going to pull these leaves that were here. There's a tag from something. I'll get that plastic out of there. But this, you know, I'll pull these leaves back in place, and just like that, it's kind of gone away, and it's habitat for something. It'll continue to break down. Really, there's absolutely no reason for me to, you know, put this, you know, send this out to the city or worry about it in any way. Again, I'm just kind of pointing that out. It's habitat that's not causing any problems here in the garden for anything else. You can see the ginger died back pretty quickly once it hit the 20s as well. Just gonna melt it to the ground, but it'll be fine. It'll be back. And it's 8 feet tall again next year and flowering. You can also see our Christmas tree back there, and all the brush that we've been collecting and some of these cleanup videos that we've been doing the last few weeks. All of that stuff's gonna end up in compost. Just getting to that moment where, again, I've been waiting 4 years or more to get to the point where we have enough material to really start generating compost. The other thing is I forgot to get this seed from the okra out here, but we've got another 4, 5, 6, and I think Steph had taken one in the house as well. But here's an okra seed. Can you see that, Steph, you think? Right there, you see that seed running down? There probably is still some seed in your garden potentially that can be collected, but I can break one of these. I got plenty out here, so I don't really need all of this, but I'll show you, you know, how much seed can actually be, you know, in one of these. We only need, you know, 10 plants, 12 plants to have enough, so I don't need a crazy amount. But this is an okra that Buddy Lee gave me that's been in South Louisiana for a long time, that I think was been in his family for a long time. But there you go, there's some seed from the okra that we had not collected yet. We'll get those started in the house here in a few weeks. Dropping my pruners. So there you go. There's a few things we got going on in the garden, getting the hellebores cut back. This is a great time of year to find weeds in the garden. You know, that almost every single one of those jobs I just did, you know, I was cutting the dahlias back and cutting the anemones back, and ended up being able to dig that smilax out after several years of it growing back up through that plant over and over. And then back there with the hellebore, I was able to get out one of those clematis, what is the fall blooming? Yeah, is it Clematis paniculata? Yeah, Clematis paniculata that was back there. Almost like I say, when you get out in the garden this time of year, you'll find that things hid in your plants during the previous year, and it's easier to find them. I do talk sometimes about not being in the beds too much if you can limit it, and I'm showing you an entire video of me standing in my in my beds compressing wet soil down, so this is not the best of ideas. So try to limit your foot traffic in there, but do get these weeds out while it's easy to get them out. And there's some things we have going on in our Raleigh garden. Let us know down below if you're able to get out and work in your garden this time of year, and anything you might be thinking about for this upcoming spring. Thanks for watching.